So, with Delicious in Dungeon wrapping up its first season, and hopefully a second one coming, I figured now would be a good time to take a look at it again. If you remember, I made a video about it a few months back when the show was about halfway through, and the main thing I talked about was how one of the prominent themes of the show was bringing people together through food. In the community, I often saw memes about how Dungeon Meshi isn't what you think it is, and oh boy, get ready for when the show gets dark. So, let's take a look at the second half of Delicious in Dungeon's first season, and let's see how accurate I was about the show. Was I wrong? Is the show not actually what I thought it was? Is it not wholesome cooking? Is it actually a lot darker than it initially leads on? Nope, looks like I was right after all. Granted, the season is a bit darker, but it's not like it was shocking or a big difference to me. It felt like a natural evolution of the themes and the story. I expected it to go like this. Maybe it'd be considered darker if you were wanting it just to be a wholesome, no plot slice of life kind of show, but that's clearly not what it is from the get-go. And the second half of the season really was great. It gave us more characters, more food, more monsters, time with the main party. We got to learn more about the world, more about the characters, on a much deeper level here than before. And wow, the animation by Studio Trigger especially really shined in this one. So as I dive a bit deeper, please be aware this will be a spoiler discussion about the show, just up until the end of the first season. Specifically, I'd like to talk about the Fallon Chimera episode in particular. Right after rescuing her from the dragon, she is kidnapped by the mad magician and turned into this dragon bird Fallon hybrid, and she has a fight against the main Laios party, Shudo's party, and Kaburu's party, and it is incredible. This is, I think, the big twist that people were talking about, how it's suddenly very, very brutal. People are getting killed, and at a faster rate, but the way the action is choreographed and directed, it's done so well. And it feels like a desperate struggle to survive, and Fallon feels especially powerful. Studio Trigger really did excel at this, and I hope to see them come back for a second season. At the end of my last video, I talked about what I wanted to see in the future of the show. And one of those things was to see characters that challenge the theme of bringing people together through food. We did get a few examples of that in this half. Some of the best ones I can think of are Shuro and Kaburu. Surprisingly, Shuro seems to be a bit of a controversial character in the community. I have friends who didn't like him, and I've seen people who aren't big fans of him, but I don't see it. I think he's a really interesting character. It's great to see that introverted, non-confrontational, Japanese-inspired culture clashing with Laios, who's just so genuine and just doesn't care about deceiving people at all, or trying to look beyond people's facade at all, and just having conflict arise out of that. It's both comedic and dramatic, which I think is fun. And him just being frankly disgusted at them eating monsters is great to see. Kaburu, on the other hand, is really interesting in how easily he reads people and how he's trying to manipulate and deceive them into revealing their true colors so he can judge them. I think that's really interesting, and his backstory with being terrorized by monsters as children, but wanting to please people just so he can get on their good side, so he can figure out more about them, thus eating monsters of liars, it's really great to see. In addition, his whole party is pretty interesting. I like the dynamic of it, how he's the unquestionable leader of the group, but they're not really great at being adventurers either. And they've got a dog in Kuro, and I just like how kobolds in Dungeon Meshi are dogs rather than just generic kind of dragony lizard things. I think that's way more interesting and fun. Speaking of animal-like characters, we also got Izutsumi, who is the cat girl. She initially challenges the theme of bringing people together because she's a teenager and a cat and a picky eater. All those things mixed up just mean she wants nothing to do with anybody. But she's slowly coming around as the episodes progress, thanks to Senshi and the others. Granted, she is still a little moody and a teenager, but as a cat, we can only expect to get so far with her. Izutsumi was actually one of the things that was hyped up the most about the second half for me. She's very, very popular on social media. People are so happy and people love Izutsumi. I'm looking forward to seeing more of her because I feel we didn't really get the most time spent with her on this one. Obviously, she's popular because she's a cat and people love cats, but I often felt she was just kind of there for a lot of episodes. Unless the episode was specifically focused on her, she was just in the background a bit. But that's kind of part of her character charm, being a cat and everything. And she did only join later on into the season, so I'm looking forward to seeing more from her in season 2. And then challenging that theme directly is Thistle, the mad magician. He does this literally by taking the food they used, forming the dragon, and using Fallon in the dragon to tear her away from the rest of the party. That's literally using food to bring people apart. It's actually quite funny. But I'm interested to see more about his backstory, because I think there's a lot more to him than is what initially let on. He's not just a generic bad guy. And he's got an eye for monster design because that Fallon Chimera is very cool. Speaking of which, let's talk about the monsters. Again, all super interesting in how Ryoko Kui executes fantasy tropes and mythical creatures across different cultures and makes them interesting and unique. She puts a lot of emphasis on their anatomy and how they function as actual species, which is such a nice attention to detail that adds realism and helps with the cooking sections too. The dragon was so cool. It's a typical dragon in the sense it has its weak spots and fire breathing, but what makes it unique is the way it's described how it breathes fire, by clicking its tongue against the roof of its mouth like a lighter. It's so creative, and it adds like a bit of scariness to it as well, like it's stalking you. You just hear that clicking in the distance, not knowing where it is, echoing around the city. I think that's really cool. The dryads were another interesting one, how they could just be generic plant creatures, but she focuses more on the pollen and how it causes hay fever, which is also dangerous for the party because it dampens their senses, but it's also comedic, which is really fun. And the dryad fruit just being these human faces on like pumpkins, I think it's really good. Another thing I liked about the second half is how it's getting more personal and focusing on the individual characters a bit more, and the monsters reflect that. We got a lot of monsters focusing on the psyche and mental strength of the party. Laios even comments on that at one point and how difficult it is to deal with them. Things like the nightmare and shapeshifters are purely mental ones. One point Laios has to go into Marcel's dream to help her and deal with her past trauma of childhood and living beyond people that she cares about being an elf. And the shapeshifters make for a fun episode about how we perceive other people and how difficult that can be for the party when no one has a really good view of Laios, unfortunately. Poor guy. And another thing is, despite being so abstract and intangible, Kui was able to make them function as edible creatures and base it in reality with making the nightmares a form of mollusk that's actually a dragon, and it's based off an actual Japanese mythological thing as well, which I think is really, really cool. In addition to watching the anime, I also read the manga up to where the anime ended, and it has so many good little extra tidbits with the monsters, the characters in different AU settings, and illustrations by Ryoko Kui. I think both the anime and the manga have a lot to offer, and both are worthwhile taking a look at. The manga is the original and direct from Kui's mind, and has extras and enriches the world, whereas the anime, being by Trigger, is of course amazingly expressive and can truly elevate a lot of the emotional and action scenes of music. They complement each other perfectly, so I don't think there's a single definitive way to consume, eating pun, Dungeon Meshi. After reading the manga and taking a look at Ryoko Kui's personal blog, I think she's become one of my favorite mangaka, from her writing and even more so just her art and as an artist and creator. You can tell she has so much passion for the things she draws based on her own interest, how she incorporates it all in drawing different body types, ages, cultures, mentalities, shapes and sizes, all with so much love and care, and fleshes them out so well. Even in her sketches that she posted on her blog, she talks about how she wanted to diversify what she's drawing because she feels she draws too much of the same body type too often, or wanting to develop the kobolds based on wild dog species, or the orcs and make them more unique and more interesting as a functional culture. I think it's such really cool attention to detail, and seeing a bit into her process and force behind it is really nice as well. Then with the main party, I loved how we've gotten to know them better, how they all get focus. It could be argued that Laios is the main character, but that would be a disservice to the others. It's clear that the whole party are the main characters. Chilchuck growing closer to the party and revealing more about himself, coming to admit that he truly does care about these weird monster-eating weirdos, despite going through his midlife crisis at 29. Marcel's dedication and sometimes lack thereof to finding Fallon, seeing her grow to be a more patient, resilient, and understanding person. Laios and Senshi in particular really worked for me in the second half. I think Laios has become my favorite character just because of how genuine he is, how much he loves his sister, how he struggles to understand others and how he loves monsters. He's never really felt like he fit in anywhere in the town he grew up, or even when he thought he did find friends, he then found out he was wrong, as was the case with Shuro. How he feels the weight of being a leader, and he often has self-doubt many times throughout the manga, but that doesn't stop him, he's just so determined. And then Senshi. He's just one of those characters that you didn't think needed a backstory until they got one. He's just simple, he's there to feed everybody, he's there to enforce the theme of bringing people together, right? But when he gets one, it makes so much sense and is very well done. It's emotional, and the way it's resolved with the party and the food is just done perfectly, showing that characters that are pretty static and in their ways and established can also have really good development. He absolutely is the heart of the party. Another little tidbit that I really liked was the ending theme, and for some reason it just hit really hard for me. The illustrations that play alongside it, the music. While the first ending was very happy with a party, the second one is called Sparkling Ashes, which is a much more somber song. I've cried at this song just because it is emotional for me, because I've gotten attached to the story and the characters and everything. It just really did it for me. How dark and violent it was in the second half, I believe, is a good change of pace. It was really great and exciting, but it did get back to that theme of bringing people together always. For a lot of the second half, we saw Laios' party struggling, but it focused more on them recovering and growing closer through the food. And even when there was this conflict in darker parts, a lot of it was resolved or at least mediated through food, such as when Laios and Shuro had that big falling out and fighting. It was eventually Laios winning because he had been eating and taking care of himself. So the main theme I spoke about still works, but more in a deeper personal sense for each character. Now, for Season 2, of course, I want to see how the story progresses. Laios being set up as the closest man to conquer the dungeon, for better or for worse, due to his character, is really interesting to me, and I'm excited to see how that plays out, how it challenges that typical Chosen One trope, what interesting monsters we'll see, how creative it will get as the story reaches its climax. I'm excited to see more from the Canaries, since we didn't get too much of them in this season, to see how Shuro develops and to see more of Kabru, because I feel like we still don't know all there is to know about him. Most importantly though, I am hoping to see the story tackle a theme that I can feel beginning to develop, and that is loneliness. How it affects us all. People from different lifestyles, ages, and class all experience it. I hope it covers how unhealthy and damaging it can be to not have the right people or anybody to properly support and guide you. How lonely you can feel from not fitting in with others, being ostracized for your interests, or even having people or wealth, but still feeling lonely. I feel that's a theme that'll hit home especially hard now after everything that's gone on in the past few years, and I'm excited to see how that is tied into the food and being a way to bring people out of loneliness. Delicious in Dungeon is one of those stories, and Ryoko Kui is one of those artists where it goes beyond just being a good anime or manga for me. It's one of those stories that, rather than just makes me sit and think or reflect, it makes me want to act and do things. It makes me want to create. The creativity and passion put on display here is just so infectious, and I want to take part in some way. And those always sit on a higher tier for me. So it may not be the perfect anime or the most popular, but Delicious in Dungeon has certainly been one of my favorite anime in a long time, and I can't wait to see what more it has in store for us in the future. Hello, thank you for watching this video. I really enjoyed Delicious in Dungeon, and I hope you did as well. It was an excellent anime for the first half of this year, and I'm looking forward to what other anime we might get just around the corner. If you enjoyed the video, please do leave a like and a comment, or even subscribe if you want to see more. On my last video, I enjoyed seeing all the comments that you guys wrote, and I incorporated a lot of that into the writing for this video. It was one of my favorite parts. So I really appreciate that, and I would appreciate if you also comment on this one. Alright, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye bye!